So in introduction, ladies and gentlemen, we have the Masters of Wine, Justin Howard-Sneyd, who will chair the evening, assisted by Richard Bampfield. Please excuse me if I get these names slightly wrong. I'm sure you all know each other very well, and I trust nobody will be offended. But guests tonight, we have Stephen Skelton, Viti-Culture consultant, business owner and author. Matt Strugnell, Vineyard manager at Ridgeview. Michael Dominguez, co-founder and partner of the Wine Cartel in New Mexico. And we'll be joined by Andre Spence, chairman of the Farmers Club, Nos Clark, wine writer, presenter and broadcaster. The vineyards and their representatives are Alex Creasy from Far Acre Vineyard, Rachel Davey from Plumpton College, Natalia Pizzone from Stanlake Park Wine Estate, Rob Merchant from White Castle Vineyard, Charlie Scrace. Hi there. From Coolhurst Vineyard, isn't it, I think? Mark Darley from All Angels at Enbourne Vineyard, and Jane Walty from Oatley Vineyard. Today is sponsored by Matthew Berry from the CLM, Mike Dyer from Kreston Reeves, and Doug Jackson and myself from the National Farmers Union, and supported by Yara. Viti-Culture Live 2020 is brought to you by the Viti-Culture team, Hugh Goldworthy, Jonathan West, Lindsay Dennis, and Cam. Welcome, everybody.
You too.
Just getting a little bit of noise from one or two of the speakers. So if you feel you might be making noise, it's a good idea to mute yourselves until you need to speak. George, have you run through, or is there still a little more to go?
No, I'm happy to hand over to you.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you very, very much. And thank you very much indeed for asking me to come and just have a chat about these wines. It's really nice to be able to see and meet you all. And I think it's fantastic that an event that normally happens in person, which I think is on Thursday, is still happening, and still happening very much with all the support of the sponsors. And I hope a good list of attendees. I believe there's quite a few who are signed up, which is fantastic. It's a very exciting moment in English viticulture, and it's growing from strength to strength. And we need these moments to get together and taste together and chat about how things are going, I think, to move forwards, and for everyone to kind of go on the same journey as we get better and better at doing what we do. So my job really is just to facilitate the chat about and tasting of 7 different wines that you guys have all sent in and supplied. Now, I believe that some of you have got, I think all of you have got 1 or 2 bottles. Is that the case? And nobody has got all of them except perhaps me. Anyone else want to identify themselves as having all of these wines in front of them? I've got a nice little lineup of all 7 here, and I've luckily enough had the chance to go through. You've got a couple, haven't you, Richard?
Lindsay, you started with them all, obviously.
we have, I will confess, got all 7, yes.
Excellent. You should, because you were sending them out. So if you didn't keep one of yourselves, you were doing a disservice. But they arrived very efficiently yesterday, and I have just had a quick taste through, just so I'm not sort of tasting live on camera. And I don't plan to spend too much time talking. I think really the best plan is to start talking about each wine one by one, and just ask a couple of questions of the producer. And anyone who has that bottle and would like to chip in with what they think, please do, because I always think these things work better if they're a bit of a dialogue and a chat than a sort of outward monologue. I kind of ordered them in sparkling first and then still, and then, well, it sort of made sense to do them in vintage order in reverse. So we're starting with the Far Acre, which is the youngest of the fizzes. It's actually a rosé. It's a Far Acre sparkling rosé. For those of you who haven't got the bottle, this is what it looks like, and I believe is it the first year of production of this wine? Now I'm addressing that to Alex, aren't I? Alex, are you able to unmute yourself and have a chat a little bit about your wine?
Yes, it's the first year we've done a sparkling rosé, and it's the 3rd year that we've done a wine. Fantastic.
And you are in, just going to check my notes here, you are in
we're in Marden.
Marden, that's right. Now where about? Marden's Kent, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So we're just sort of between Hush Heath and Herbert Hall, sort of, if you draw a line between the two, we're sort of halfway between the two.
Well, a great part of the world to be in. So I think some great wines being made down there. How long have you had vines in the ground at Far Acre?
So we planted in 2010 during the royal wedding, William and Kate's wedding. That weekend we planted it.
You can see you remember it well. And
Yeah.
What was the farm doing before it was planted to vines?
So it was always a fruit farm. It was all orchards that we grubbed out, and then yeah, we planted the vines in 2010. We bought it in 2003.
Lovely. And may I ask what your background is? Are you from agricultural or wine background, or do you come from a different part of the world of work?
So I was working in the city in IT, and then I decided I'd had enough of the rat race and bought the farm in 2003. We've also got a campsite, and we do glamping as well.
Fantastic. Well, look, you must be very proud. It's a lovely bottle. Those of you who haven't got it, I'll just briefly describe it to you. It's a very pale rosé, and I did want to have a chat with you about your philosophy of colour. I judge a few competitions, and we often do the rosé category and then the regular white sparkling category. And there are a few of the rosé wines. It's quite hard to tell whether they really are discernibly pink. And this is on the edge. It's got a hint of pink, but it's really quite delicate. And you need to see it against a really white background to be absolutely sure. And there's certainly a little touch of nice pink in there. What are you aiming for with your rosé colour? Is that a consideration, or are you just trying to press the grapes and produce the wine that's as good as it can be?
Yeah, we were aiming for a salmon pink, but it's obviously difficult to tell how it's going to end up when you're still leaving. We left it in contact with the Pinot Noir grapes to try and put colour into it, but I think we just about got away with it. We ended up with enough colour, but not too much.
Well, I think it's a very pretty colour and lovely wine. So yeah, congratulations. Do you make all the wine on site? Do you have a winery as well as vineyards?
Yeah, I do everything. So we pick it ourselves, and we've got a little winery, and we riddle it by hand, and we disgorge it by hand, and we label it by hand, and yeah, it's all completely done by hand.
Well, it's really lovely. Well done. How many bottles do you make?
About 1,000 of that one, about 1,100.
That's not so many. And it's gone on the market already, or is it just about to be launched?
Yeah, no, that one's been on the market for a little while. But it's been on the market for about 3 months now.
Justin?
Yeah.
Are we, those of us that were sent the wines, are we meant to be saying something?
Yes, absolutely. So I'd love to hear from anyone. So hands up who's got a bottle of this lovely wine. So Stephen's definitely got one. I can see... I have to get my glasses on, unfortunately. I've got to the point I can't read properly.
I think it's only 2 bottles have been sent to 3 different people, haven't they? Richard, Matt, and myself.
Could be right. So Stephen, I'd love to hear what you have to think if you're the other one who's got this. And the lady on the bottom right of my screen, whose screen name is Heath, also has a bottle. So I'd love to hear from you too. So Stephen, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's very good. I mean, I obviously I know this very well because I set up Hush Heath and have been involved with that since it started. So I know that area, and of course I was, why make it Lamberhurst back in the 80s, and people bang on about chalk being necessary for great sparkling wine, but in fact, this is really quite heavy clay down there. 17 was because of the frost year, and I surprised you. Did you get frosted? You must have done, I suspect.
Yeah, we did, but not as badly as a lot of other people. We caught it the year before, but not that year.
Right. I mean, what I like about it is it's got great fruit, it's got good acidity, but it's got a really nice dosage. I mean, I think I'm not one of these 0 to sort of 5 grams dosage people for English wine. I like to have a little bit more because I think our acidity will take it. And this has a great balance. It's really easy on the palate, but there's backbone there. It's quite light in colour. I mean, I think if I was, criticising, which I'm not, I would say the colour could perhaps be a little bit darker. But it's a great glass of wine, and I think you've done very well there.
Thank you.
And the lady in blue.
Good evening, everybody. Yep, it's Heather, short for Heather. I'm the marketing manager for Yara UK. So thank you ever so much for having me on board this evening. This is definitely my first ever kind of wine tasting experience. It's delicious. That's all I can say, really, Alex. It's very, very light, very, very drinkable, and for me, I have no issue with the pinkness at all. It's delightful.
Well, that's a lovely review. Thank you. And I agree. It's a delicious
Thank
wine.
you.
Congratulations, Alex. Just conscious of time, we need to try and stick to 5 minutes per wine. Otherwise, we're going to run over a bit. So I'm going to move on and move on to the next wine, which is also a sparkling rosé. I'm inelegantly using my mug of tea, or my tea mug, as my spittoon. And I'm going to move on to this one here, which is Coolhurst Rosé. It's actually called Coolhurst Lady Elizabeth. And it's a 2016 vintage. Beautiful label. And it's Charlie Strace Dickens, isn't it, Charlie, who this baby. Nice to see you, Charlie. I have met Charlie a couple of times before, so very nice to see you again. And how are you doing?
Yeah, good. We've had a bit of frost this year, so we've got some odd growth going on, but we're going to survive it. It's just a bit more hard work, as ever.
Great. And this is the third vintage of this wine?
Yeah, third vintage. Yeah.
This is your current commercial release, is it, or is it just about to come out?
No, this is we've sold half of that now. It's been out since Christmas, and we've been selling that crazy.
Great. And can I just see anyone else on the call who's actually got a bottle of this?
Yes, I have a bottle.
And Matt.
He's Gaskin. I'm the fruit expert with Yara. I'm more used to tasting fruit than tasting wine, but you know.
And does your expertise does it extend to grapes? So you're also looking after all the grapes at the moment?
Yes. Well, we're moving into grapes. I don't myself. I'm more specialised in soft fruit. But certainly we're taking a look at the grapes now, and we're also running into top fruit and stone fruits.
Forgive my ignorance, but are you marketing and buying and selling them, or are you consulting on them? What is your specific remit?
My role is as an expert, but Yara as a company is a fertiliser company. So we supply fertiliser and nutrient solutions to growers.
So you work with the growers on the quality of their fruit and advise what they might apply in order to maximise their quality. Very interesting.
Yes.
Well, look, I'm just going to very quickly say that I think this is a really great glass of wine. Well done, Charlie. It's a little bit young. Actually, it's an older vintage, but I think it's a little bit more a sort of bright, expressive rhubarb fruit. I got a sort of lovely. I don't. Sometimes rhubarb is perceived as a sort of a hint of underripeness, but for me, it's ripe rhubarb is one of the most delicious English flavours, and I think there's something of that in this. When you get a lovely pink ripe rhubarb and you just have it with a little cream, it's a delicious English hedgerow flavour, and I think this wine exhibits that really well. So that's kind of my micro review. And Giz, what did you think of it?
I think it's quite nice, to be fair. I mean, it's quite crisp, but it remains quite fluffy at the same time. So it's actually quite nice. I think if it was a hot day down here, I certainly would have most of it, if not all of it. No, it's very good. Very good.
And Matt, how do you think this stacks up?
The first thing I wrote down was luscious, generous fruit. I think it's for an English sparkling. It's got a lot of fruit in there. It's not quite as racy as some English sparklers. So I didn't think it was, it's not over the top acidity. I think it's well balanced. It's got great mouthfeel. I don't know if Charlie knows. I used to live at the bottom.
Matt, we spoke on the phone. I asked you about a leaf trimmer once through Matt.
That's right. And so I used to live just at the bottom of the road in Doomsday Gardens. So I know that. I sort of grew up around that area, so I know it very well. So I've got a slight affinity with it. I drive past that vineyard on my way to work, and so I've sort of seen it. I can sort of peer through the gates as I drive past in the mornings, and I've sort of seen it develop, and it looks like a lovely site. Sandstone, I believe.
Sand and ironstone, yeah.
Yeah, and big pond at the bottom. Hawkins Pond, I think, is sort of at the bottom there. So, no, I think it's a great wine. Really, really nice. Yeah.
Is it just, John? Is it just the one site that goes into this wine?
Yeah. So we're single vintage, single vineyard, single varietal. Every single wine we make.
So you have separate vineyard for each grape variety, or separate block in the vineyard, or all the same in the same vineyard?
No, we have all three. All from the same vineyard, but it's just that one site.
Fantastic. Well, it's a lovely wine. And I was just going to ask as well, because I don't know how many people know that you also make a wine in Provence and have had a bit of a head start on... Actually, which do you start first, Provence or England?
Well, we started the England first, but the Provence came to the market first because, of course, it's next year, as it were. No lease time.
And that's also a rosé. So you're obviously deciding to specialise in rosé for a good reason. How do you find it's working? And is Provence easier to sell than England at the moment?
Well, Provence is only easier to sell in that it's cheaper. But we sell a lot of that, yeah, for sure. But no, the rosé bits just happens to be as it is because our Blanc de Blanc and our Blanc de Noir are both on their lees. And our Blanc isn't going to come off its lees for at least 8 years. Blanc de Noir we're still working out as we go. So they've just got a lot more lease time, that's all. What Matt and Giz said about the fruit, that's designed like that. And indeed you know, that rhubarb's what we look for. And with the rosé, we want some punchy fruit. So it's only having sort of 30 months on its leaves now.
Lovely. One question I had for you before we move on, Charlie, was what's your view on aging of sparkling rosé? Do you think it's a style that really benefits from extended lees aging and then bottle aging afterwards, or is it a wine to drink fresh and young when it's released?
Personally, I think fresh and young. I mean, fresh and young, it's 30 months, so it's longer than most people do lots of things. But yeah. There's a point. There's definitely a point. We've still got some down, which we'll late disgorge. We'll work it out as we go. Personally, at the moment, these 3 years, you know, between 24 months and 30 has been about right. I recently seen it go off, but I'd like to keep the fruit. I'd love to hear what Stephen said.
I recently, I haven't tasted, of course. I recently opened a 2003 and a 2004 Hush Heath, and I was remarkably surprised by how well they'd kept. The colour hadn't kept quite so well. It had gone a little bit orange, but the flavour was fantastic. There was nothing wrong with the wine whatsoever. So I think they will age.
Commercially, it's obviously a good reason to sell the wine early. And when it tastes so expressive and so delicious, and you can really taste that primary fruit, it seems, you know, it seems a shame to suggest anyone should keep it. I think a happy accident, if you did keep a bottle for 5 years, it would probably be fantastic. But I think it's everyone's interest to get a wine that tastes this good to be bought and drunk, you know, fairly quickly. And well done. I think it's lovely. I think time-wise, we need to move on. So the next wine on the list is the last of the sparklings, and this is not a rosé. This is a white. This is the All Angels Classic Cuvée 2014. Hands up, who's also drinking this one? Matthew, standard user, and Michael. Hello, Michael. Nice to see you. Great. Well, look, I'm just going to tip this glass out. While I do that, does anyone want to chip in with your? So, Mark, do you want to give me your thoughts while I'm just pouring a glass myself?
Do you mean me?
Yes, Mark.
Well, I can give you my thoughts, but as the producer, I think it's absolutely outstanding. So, I mean, I'll be more interested in sort of hearing your thoughts. What we tried to do was produce something that was relatively classical in style. But as you'll note, we've got an element of Pinot Gris in there as well, which gives it a slightly kind of tropical flavour. But all round, it is, we think, remarkably well balanced and comes across with some great sort of apple fruity taste to them, but at the same time, some toasty notes and some almond flavours in there as well. This is our first commercial release. There was a 2013 sparkling red, but I decided not to launch on the back of that. Somebody did, however, and it got recommended by the Daily Mail as the must-have wine for Christmas, I think 2015, so clearly I was at fault. One of my mates maintains it's absolutely brilliant for watching long sessions of Peaky Blinders and eating curry, so that wasn't really what I wanted to launch. So we've launched with this. This is the 2014, but over to you guys. You're the experts.
Well, I'm one of the questions I had for you was, this is a relatively mature wine to have released recently. How much did you taste and decide it needs holding back, why did you decide to release it when you did?
We decided to release it when we did, really because we thought that it was at a really good point in its development. There was an awful lot that we still have not yet disgorged. And in the context of when is the right time to release, I mean, one of the things that we're trying is we're experimenting in tasting on a regular basis to see how it develops. And, you know, to be perfectly honest, I mean, on Stephen's point, it's actually quite exciting to see how it does mature and develop over the course of time and produce a really rich flavour. So there was no real science other than what we're interested in doing is releasing at the optimal point rather than necessarily the quickest opportunity in order to return the cash flow.
Well, I imagine you must be able to do that cash flow wise, because some people are in a position where they just have to release and start selling their wine even when they think it's too young. And it's possibly fair to say that some English vineyards, because the wine was in demand and they didn't have much, did sell a lot of their wine really quite young. And I think with the 18 vintage in the pipeline, there's more opportunity to hold more stock back and age it a bit longer. But a lot of the wines on the market now are sort of 16s, even some people moving on to 17s. And it's nice to be able to taste a lovely mature 14, which I think is tasting great. I was going to ask you, sort of from a winemaking point of view, you've obviously let it age on the lees for a long time. Did you have full malolactic conversion, or did you opt out of mallow? It seems to have some slightly mallow.
There was some. Yeah.
Well, I think it's lovely. And you said apple. I put baked apple with a bit of butter as well, and I thought it's tasting really nice. And it's made. Am I right? That made at Hattingley.
That's right. I mean, we're lucky that Emma Rice makes the wine for us at Hattingley. We sit down and sort of discuss with her how we want it to be. And indeed, I was doing that with some 2015 just last week. And it then gets produced effectively to our specification, but obviously under the guidance of Emma, who does a wonderful job.
They have a very good team down at Hattingley, and she's great. And well, you're in good hands. But I was going to ask, as the English wine scene progresses, obviously more people are now growing and potentially building their own wineries. Is that something you plan to do, or are you holding back and waiting to see how things develop, or you definitely don't plan to do it?
Well, it's interesting you asked that. I mean, the reality is that until last Tuesday evening, I was actually in full-time employment elsewhere, and I retired then. So to be perfectly honest, I didn't have the time in order to have a winery as such. The other point is that from our perspective, until recently, we haven't actually had the land to do it. I think, if I'm honest, I probably will not develop a winery. It's one of those things where, we're very well serviced by Emma. I've also got another very good friend who's producing his own winery close by. Now, I know that, the reality is if you want to make money in this, you stand more chance of making money in a winery than you do growing grapes and producing wine and selling it. But nonetheless, I think that's not something that we'll be launching into just yet.
Well, it remains to be seen. It depends on what is in oversupply, and there is a bit of a shortage of winery space and potentially quite a lot of grapes around at the moment. So actually being in the winery business is probably quite good money at the moment.
Yeah.
If loads of people get into it at the same time, then there might be an oversupply of winemaking space, and then it'll get a lot cheaper. So, if you're reasonably small, it's probably wise to hold your counsel for a while, because it's a big investment. And, if you spend it and then find that you can get the wine made better and cheaper somewhere else, then you might regret the decision. So it's definitely worth keeping an eye on it.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of produce in a normal year, about 14,000 bottles, and we planted more vineyards so that, in a few years' time, we should be able to about 28,000 bottles. So it's quite a large chunk.
Well, it's
by
lovely.
our standards, anyway.
I also really like the name, and I did read why you decided to call it that, but it's interesting for you to tell everybody where the name All Angels came from.
Yeah, well, we sort of All Angels is made at Church, or is produced at Church Farm in Enbourne, and we live at Church Farm. The church next door is called St Michael and All Angels. It's a very historic church. It's 12th century, has either the oldest or the second oldest bell in the country. Our farm is on the side of the Roundhead encampment for the First Battle of Newbury. Excuse me, and literally on the other side of the road is where the 101st Airborne, US Airborne, left for D-Day, and after that for the Arnhem campaign as well. It's an incredibly historical area. We're about 3 miles away from Highclere, and from the vineyards we've got a wonderful view of what's called Coombe Gibbet, which is a hill, Coombe Hill, that had a double gibbet so they could hang people in pairs, which is very romantic. It's a great view.
Company.
If you've got to die, it's a good way to go.
But you didn't put that on the label for obvious reasons.
That's going to be the sparkling red that we do, yeah.
Excellent. So just remind me, hands up, who also has this bottle, and what do you think of it? So Matthew, what would you like to say? is on mute.
Evening. Yeah. Well, I'm certainly no expert on sparkling wines, but when I do drink sparkling wines, unfortunately, I often get indigestion fairly shortly afterwards. I drank a glass of this about an hour ago. Absolutely no sign of indigestion. So that gives it a big thumbs up from me.
Very good.
That must be the Alka-Seltzer we put in it as well.
That's where the bubbles come from, Matthew, you know. And Michael, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, very nice. I'm not normally a sparkling wine man, I have to admit, but yeah, very light and easy drinking. It's very nice. My wife is currently enjoying it as we speak, so thank you very much for the opportunity.
Good for her.
Excellent. Well, we've got our work cut out this evening, trying to drink 7 bottles of wine between 3 of us, so we might find the neighbours.
Justin, can I just chip in here a moment? For some reason, which I'm delighted with, I have a bottle of the All Angels Sparkling Rosé 2014, which is fabulous.
Thank you.
What I really like about it, and I'm sorry that none of the rest, it sounds as if no one else has got this bottle, I really like the boldness. It's bold in colour, it's bold in aromatics, it's bold in flavour. It tastes like a real rosé, and I think that's important. If you're going to make a rosé as opposed to a white, make it stand out, make it taste like rosé, and that's exactly what you've done.
Thank you very much. I mean, it was it's amazing. You know, people that taste it too, they sort of have a little bit of reservations about the rosé given the colour because it is quite bold, but they absolutely love it. It actually, you know, sort of a lot of people go for the rosé sooner than the classic Cuvée. I think one of the things that gives it the flavour is actually a significant proportion of it is actually Rondo. And that's balanced. So about 60% is Rondo, and 32% is Pinot Gris, the balance being Pinot Noir. So that's really what gives it a
Well, that's fascinating that Rondo is a part of it, but either way, it works really well. Just one other thing I was going to say, there was conversation just now about the aging capacity of the rosés. What I love about English sparkling wine at the moment is we don't really know. And personally, I am putting aside some white sparkling and some rosé sparkling. I just want to see how it ages. And I've got some quite mature Ridgeview sparkling rosé. And I just want to see where it goes. My hunch is, because of the natural balance of the wines, they will age really, really well. We know that some of the Blanc de Blanc already ages well. There's no reason why the rosé shouldn't too. I think it's going to be fascinating to see, and that's one of the exciting aspects of it, that we've got all this to discover. It's ahead of us.
Absolutely.
Very true. And it was lovely for me to discover 2 wines that I'd never tasted before, and one I have had a brief taste of, from small producers, not the usual suspects. Very interesting to see how many great new labels are being launched, and just congratulations to all 3 of you on 3 lovely sparkling wines. It's probably time we move on to the still ones now, but well done to you. We're going to start the still range with the Oatley Leonoras. So this is a wine made from a grape called Kernling. And Kernling, I believe, it has one of its parents as Riesling. I haven't tasted very much Kernling before, and I'm interested to know what you think the sort of classic varietal characteristics of Kernling would be. I mean, Stephen, perhaps you know English wine grapes better than almost anybody else. What would you say are the key characteristics you should look out for in a Kernling?
Well, I haven't tasted. It's a variety that's sort of vaguely came into fashion at one point. One of our viticultural colleagues, who's now no longer trading, was rather pro it. But it's an offshoot of Kerner, really. Kerner is a sort of Riesling look-alike, quite late, quite high acid, and it never really made the grade in the UK because its acid was too high. It may be, however, that now, with obviously warmer conditions, that it will come into its own. But I can't say I have tasted a Kernling, an English Kernling, for many, many years. So, Jane, you're the one, aren't you? Aren't you the grower?
Yes. Hi, Jane. You sound very quiet. I don't know if you're on mute.
No, you're not coming
Yeah,
over.
for some reason, you don't appear to be on mute, but we can't hear you, which is a shame. Keep trying. Yeah, sadly, we may not be able to hear from Jane. Jane, if you do find you fix that issue, just chip in, because we'd love to hear what you have to say. But so this, I will tell you what I can about this kernelling. Oatley's is grown in Somerset, and I'd love to hear from Jane exactly where in Somerset. There's some great vineyards down there. This is a 2017, and I was going to try and ask a little bit about what the age profile of kernelling is and what it's like, because this is obviously 2 years older than it could be, and has a lovely, I described it as like buttered asparagus with quite a lot of lemon juice on it. There's definitely a green edge to it, but in that slightly asparagus style, which is quite English, but it also has the richness of a little bit, benefit a bit of age, and I don't think any oat. I think that butter's just coming from probably malolactic fermentation and some age. And it's a really lovely glass of wine. And some English wines are very aromatic and very hedgerow and floral, and this perhaps doesn't have so much of that character initially. It's more I would say like a northern French wine, not very fruity and expressive, but with a lovely linear acidity that carries it through, and balanced with a lovely creamy butterscotch kind of flavour as well. So I'm really enjoying it. This may be the first kernelling I've had the chance to taste. Who else out there has got a bottle of the Oatley Leonoras? Richard, you do. Great. So what do you think, Richard?
This is the first, as far as I'm aware, it's the first kernelling I've ever drunk. But I'm a big fan of Kerner. I really like Kerner as a grape in Germany. And what interests me about this is it's got a fruitiness. You can see the Riesling parentage, but it's just more textured. There's more middle palate to it than I was expecting. And it's really, really nice wine. I was expecting something a little bit maybe lighter, more bracing, and it's got those characters, but there's more middle, more flesh on the middle to it as well. I think it works really, really well. And I agree with you, probably no oak, but however it's made, they seem to have brought out just some of the joy of the grape. It's a beautiful wine. Really enjoying it.
Susie Atkins wrote about this recently and was in her top 20 this year, only a couple of weeks ago, in fact, mid-June, as one of her top 20 English wines. And I also think it's really quite well priced for some English wines can be quite expensive nowadays. And I think one of the joys of this is actually really affordable wine that offers you a lot of wine for your money without being very showy. It's a lovely wine that, as I say, sort of lingers in the glass, has a lovely length to it, and as you said, Richard, more middle palate than you might expect from.
I think part of that, and this is as ever. I mean, I'm preaching to the converted here, but it's so often the key to good English wine is that balance between acidity and a tiny bit of residual sugar. And I assume that this isn't bone dry, and I think it's really well judged in the way it's made. So the fruitiness comes through, but it still finishes clean as a whistle. Really nicely done.
Great. And so who else has a glass of this? Did I see Poppy? Yes, and Michael as well. So whichever one of you unmutes first can get in there.
We're getting elderflower up our neck of the woods in that.
Well, that's
you're mentioning hedgerows and things like that, and that's how we took it.
Well, thank you. I mean, hedgerow elderflower is definitely a smell I often get on English wines, and when I talk about the more hedgerow style, I do get a strong elderflower often. This one for me didn't particularly come up with a strong elderflower, but I think it's definitely a hallmark of quite a few English whites, and kernelling may be one. Michael, what did you think?
I agree with all the comments before. It's actually a very nice balanced wine, and as I said before, I'm not so much of a sparkling man. I'm more of a dry white man, and I would rate this very highly personally. Yeah, very nice.
Jane, have you fixed your microphone problem?
Yeah. What a shame we can't hear from it. It sounds like it's praise indeed, and we can't hear from it.
Shame.
Yes, it's really sad. If you've got any comments to make, if you go to the chat at the bottom of the screen, you may well be able to type us something. So if you've got something you want to say, do jot it in there. But we probably will also need to move on to the next wine, because it's now, time is ticking on. We've got 3 more wines in 20 minutes. So I think probably it's time to move on. What we're going to taste next is the Plumpton wine. So this is a Bacchus made at Plumpton. This is a 2016 vintage. And again, I'm intrigued to know a little bit about aging profile on English whites, because lot of whites around the world are bought and drunk pretty damn quickly. Most New Zealand Sauvignon is launched, grown in January, February, March, picked in March, April, made into wine and on the shelves before Christmas and sold before the first year is out. Quite a lot of these wines are a little bit more mature. And is that because English wine needs a bit of age, or because it deserves a bit of age? It'd be really interesting to know what your thoughts are. So this is a Bacchus from Plumpton. Who is drinking this one? Hands up, please. So Giz, me, I didn't see any other hands. So it's you and me, Giz. We're going to talk about this one. I was very struck when I smelt this that it didn't immediately smell like that very over-the-top hedgerow nettles kind of smell that you get from Bacchus. It reminded me of a Sancerre. It really reminded me of a Loire white, where the fruit isn't quite so extreme. You do have a gentle herbaceous grass kind of aroma. And I think Bacchus is a variety that can be very exuberant or quite restrained. And I think the age has probably done some favours to this and brought down the exuberance a bit. And then, although it's still a lovely fresh nose, but when you actually taste it on the palate, it's a lot fuller and richer than a lot of Bacchuses. And I'm intrigued to know from is it Rachel at Plumpton? Rachel, are you with us? I actually can't see if Rachel's on the screen, and she may not.
I don't think she's here, Justin.
So there's no one here from Plumpton to tell us about this, which is a shame. You all know Plumpton well, I'm sure, and I'm intrigued. I've never really understood with the winemaking at Plumpton, who's in charge and how much do the students get involved, and does a student lead each wine? Can anyone fill me in on that? Who studied at Plumpton? Did you get to make a wine when you were there? Any thoughts? Stephen, you know Plumpton quite well. How does it work?
You're on mute.
Yeah, I don't know Plumpton at all. Sorry, I'm not involved whatsoever. I have no idea how they make the wine.
But that's obviously they're all studying winemaking, and I'm just sort of they've got vineyards, and
they've got a winemaker there, haven't they? I imagine the winemaker tries to keep the students well away.
Justin, I'll come in here. The winemaker is Sarah Midgley, and she's the one who leads the process. And I've visited Plumpton a number of times in recent years. And it's just astonishing the quality of wines they're producing. It is a team effort with all the students involved. And Sarah, well, she must be very, very good at what she does, I think, because the quality has been incredibly consistent. And I mean, you and I have both done a number of blind tastings, and Stephen, you've created them in many cases. And Plumpton has consistently come out incredibly well for both white and rosé in the sparkling tasting.
Well, I certainly agree, and it's one of the reasons I was intrigued to know, this wine feels like it's had a guiding mind behind it. And I've got the impression that Plumpton, the students are all allowed to make little micro cuvées, and I don't know if individual students take on individual plots and look after them on any scale, or whether the Plumpton winemaking team do it and the students sort of watch and observe, which sounds like maybe the case. It's a really lovely wine, this, and a very unusual style of Bacchus for me.
I think you're right, Justin. I studied and trained at Plumpton about 20 years ago, and we certainly did get to make our own very small batches of wine, right through from a block of vines in the vineyard to making a few hundred litres of our own stuff. And since then, I think they've upped their the wines that are available more commercially as well. So the profiles changed a little. I mean, blimey, there was like 12 students doing the course when I was there, and it's changed immensely. But bravo, I say. I mean, it's a good way to learn.
Absolutely. Well, it's essential to be allowed to have the chance to try something yourself. I personally speaking, I'm an experiential learner. I really don't like learning from books. Just the information doesn't go in, or it goes in and drops out the other side. Whereas when you do something and you touch it, you smell it, you see it, you hear it, all your senses are involved, and you learn it much, much better. And so, I think it's great to give people the chance to learn if they're learning to be a winemaker, they need to make some wine, and that is, that's how you learn. This is a lovely style. It's slightly high residual sugar, which I think really suits the style well, because it's quite acidic without the sugar. And Bacchus can be quite a phenolic grape. Have a little bit of a catch in the throat, like nettles. It sort of slightly stingy grape, and actually a little bit of sugar just softens that off. This has got 7 grams in it, which I think is just about right. Some people regard the residual sugar as a bit of a no-no, but personally I'm all in favour of it. Obviously, if you're making sparkling, it's kind of necessary for most styles. Sorry, remind me who else had the Bacchus and what else?
I did. I have it.
Yes, yes, of course.
I would say certainly straight out of the bottle, you could taste the elderflower immediately. Now it's been sitting for a little bit. Now you'd start to get more of the flavour coming through, but it's quite a nice wine in a sense that I don't normally like the drier type of wines, but this has a sort of light subtleness to it, which is actually quite nice, balanced on the back of the tongue. So I quite like it.
Good. And Richard, you organised a Bacchus tasting not very long ago. And what were your thoughts about Bacchus as a variety and what it can do and what it best does?
It was just fascinating. Okay, the people attending the tasting were all engaged in Bacchus. Natalia was there, for instance. Hello, Natalia. And so everybody who attended was interested in the subject. It was quite interesting. There were a number of people who didn't attend because, well, they're just less excited about Bacchus, which I find extraordinary. I think Bacchus is a beautiful grape, and I think it works really, really well in England. And the feedback from the tasting itself was incredibly positive. The wines were strong. They were good. There was a variety of styles, but the feedback was strong. What was interesting, we did show a couple of vintages of more mature Bacchus from Chapel Down, and they scored very highly. And as I said with sparkling, I suspect we still have yet to understand how well Bacchus can age. But I think there will be some really good wines, some aged wines that come through in the future. But it is, I suppose what did come through from the tasting, the abiding memory was it does divide people. Not everybody loves Bacchus. But I think the majority quite like the aromatics, the freshness, and the pure drinkability of Bacchus. But it is, as we were talking about the sparkling, it's all a question of balance. And you said it, Justin, it's a question of balancing the residual sugar and the natural freshness of English wines.
Well, certainly I'm a big believer in Bacchus. And I think what appeals to people is that if English whites historically made from Germanic varieties, often slightly sweet, in the 70s and 80s, had a slightly floral, possibly slightly sickly remembrance for some people. What I think Bacchus does is cuts out all of that, and it's really it's the closest we've got to a New Zealand Sauvignon. It's got assertive, bold fruit with a slightly herbaceous edge. It's pretty dry, it's quite acidic, it's got real mouth-watering freshness, and then maybe just a touch of sugar on the end, as a lot of New Zealand Sauvignons now do, to balance that acidity. And it has the same, it fits the same sort of drinking occasion, although it's got a slightly different flavour profile to Sauvignon. And I think a lot of people in the UK really love Sauvignon, and therefore they kind of like Bacchus almost automatically. And you can take Bacchus more aromatic and more herbaceous, and sometimes a bit more aggressive. But I think the ones that are delicately assertive and have a strong Bacchus character without being over the top, that are really nicely balanced, are extremely good drinking.
I think
I just chip in, Justin, I agree totally with that. That its other attribute for me is the lower alcohol in England. That Bacchus is typically coming in around 12%, between 11.5% and 12.5%. I love that. That's what I find myself drinking at home more and more. And I think with reds, I sense the market still really likes quite big reds. But with whites, I just sense that the market is going towards slightly lower alcohol. And I think Bacchus has got a really good calling card there.
There's quite a few people now planting Sauvignon Blanc. It's creeping up the charts, as it were. It doesn't ripen every year. It can be good, can be exceptional, but in many years it needs blending. And a Bacchus Sauvignon Blanc blend is the obvious partner. And I think as we see more people taking, if you're faced with the do I plant Sauvignon Blanc, do I plant Bacchus, people might well take the view that climate change is erring on the sort of plus side, and they will try some Sauvignon Blanc. So I think we're going to see some more Sauvignon Bacchus blends come through.
I think it's a natural blend. I can absolutely see
that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, that's great, and I think there's a lovely wine. And its aging also shows you, I think, that you don't have to drink it very young. You can keep it. And I was really struck. I went on the Master of Wine trip to New Zealand a year and a half ago. They showed us some old Sauvignons that were absolutely epic. And I had no idea that New Zealand Sauvignon could age in the way that really good Sancerre can age. And I was completely amazed by how well they aged. Because I just, normally you taste the Sauvignon 2 years after it should have been drunk, and you think it's lost a bit of that fruit, and you wonder why you bother keeping it. But actually, really good ones, if you keep them 10 years, they can be absolutely stunning.
Can I just ask a quick question about this? Obviously, it seems like it must be grown on chalk, this. And how much would Bacchus prefer being grown on chalk? Perhaps it's a great question to some of the vineyards, but actually themselves, and just saying, how much would it prefer to be on chalk than other grounds that we might have? Because we've got such a huge, eclectic bunch of different, earths, if you like, loams and various things like that across the southeast. That I just wonder if it would be better suited to do that.
Well, Stephen, we definitely ought to bring in at this point, but I think there are polarised views around soil types, and some say that the actual soil isn't that important. It's much more important to get drainage, to get the right environment for the vine to grow. The physical attributes of the soil are more important than the composition, and the pH, but also the aspect, the altitude, all those aspects are really more important than soil. Who's got a view on chalk and its contribution, and whether Bacchus would do well or not well on chalk? Stephen, you're on mute.
Yeah, with aromatic varieties, the ripeness level is the most important thing. If you can ripen it, the riper it is, the more flavor profile it has, and so the soil doesn't make a lot of difference in that respect.
Interesting.
Great. Okay. Well, I think time-wise, we probably need to move on. We've got 2 more wines to taste. We are going to move on to the Stanlake Park King's Fumé. And this is a step older still, so this is 2015. And this is a slightly oak style. So hands up who has got a bottle of the Stanlake. So Stephen has, Natalia, and Jonathan also. We haven't heard from Jonathan yet, so let's bring him in. So just first of all, briefly, I have to confess, very many years ago, I was the wine buyer at Safeway supermarket, and we did quite a lot of business with Stanlake. And also prior to that, I worked at the Fumé Wine Centre. We used to sell Thames, was it Valley Vineyards Fumé, which I think was made at Stanlake by John Warrenchak, which I think is probably the sort of precursor of this wine. Stephen.
Valley Vineyards was the first name. Thames Valley Vineyards, Thames Valley Vineyards, Stanlake Park. 1979 it was planted.
In 1993, 1994, I was selling the 91 and 92 vintage of Valley Vineyards Fumé in the Fulham Road Wine Centre. And it was great, and everyone really loved it. And I think
John Warrenchak, who's now winemaker at Denbigh's, of course, he was winemaker there. That's where he started.
Exactly. Yes. And then Safeway took the Stanlake. I forget exactly which cuvée it was, but as its own label, dry white, and did very well with it. So, Natalia, you're at Stanlake now, is that right?
Yeah, we took over. It's a different management team. It's me and my husband. I am pretty much the manager, and he is the winemaker. He's Italian. So he introduced, we obviously started with similar wines, but we introduced a slightly different approach, a little more international, more approachable, and more open to different customers approach, let's call it. Let's more approachable.
Natalia, when did you start working there?
2 years ago, pretty much, we took over. And so this is one of the wines that we just released together with others, Rosé and Reds. We've been working a lot on the Reds. I'm from Argentina, my husband is Italian, so we have this natural tendency to go towards the Reds. But I thought, for this tasting, that would be interesting to have this. Is a wine that actually has been on the market for many, many years, perhaps done by different winemakers, but always pretty much the same idea. Everybody would put a different touch on it. It's 2015. It's a blend of Chardonnay and Ortega being a grape that is not that super well known, particularly by the customer, but we call it,
Natalia, I was just going to ask you about the oak treatment for this wine. Do you know how long it's been in which type of wood? And
Yeah, we have French oak barrels, typical 225 liters barrels, and it has been on an average of 2 years. 20% of it was new, and the rest was old oak. So it definitely has the oak flavors, and you can easily tell that. No malo, but you can tell the texture of the oak on that wine. But yeah, it's just 20% new oak.
Well, it's definitely a hallmark of the style that you, I think, consciously are trying to showcase an oak style of white, and I think it's pretty successful. It's definitely still discernible, and it's quite an old wine. I'd expected it to have melded a little bit more by now. So for fans of oak, I think this is a lovely wine. If you're not so keen on oak, you might find the note a little bit standing out. And what is your philosophy now? What are you aiming for? Are you trying to make the same Fumé style from these grapes now, or how would you do this if you were in charge from the beginning?
Well, I don't think it's a wine that we can make every year, and we don't even try to make it every year. You need the Chardonnay to ripen properly to get flavors, and that's not something that you can do. One thing is a Chardonnay for sparkling, another thing is a Chardonnay for a white Burgundy style. That's why Ortega also brings something to the blend, as Ortega is a bit easier to ripen in this country compared with Chardonnay. Yeah, it does need age, and it hasn't been a lot on the bottle either. It was released in May, so I guess it will still need to integrate a bit. We are focusing on still wine, and this we have 5 whites, and this is the oak version of the whites. All the others have no influence with oak. Yeah, our idea and our approach for Stanlake Park is to make basically on still wines, approachable and affordable still wines, and that's what we're trying to do. We do have 3 sparkling wines, but because everybody wants some English bubbles on the portfolio, but we are really focused on our still wines, and that's one of the examples of the still wines that we make.
Well, look, Natalia, it's great. Thank you. And I really am excited to see how you develop what you're doing. And it's great, I think, for the English wine scene to have an Italian and an Argentinian working here, bringing different knowledge, different skills, and a different approach. And, you know, it's a wonderful historic estate, Stanlake. You've got some lovely buildings and lovely old vineyards. And I'm sure you'll make some changes, but I think you know, there's a lot of good things to hold on to that have been done over the years there. So thank you very much for showing us that. I think time is ticking on, so we do need to move on to the last wine, which is we're on to a lovely Pinot Noir from White Castle. And this is in Wales, and really very lovely Pinot. And there's not very many wineries in the UK that can ripen and express Pinot in the bottle, I think, as well as this. I was really impressed when I tasted it. And Rob, well done. Tell us a little bit about White Castle. How long you've been going? How many hectares you have?
We planted 2009. Planted 2 hectares, or just short of 2 hectares then, and we planted a further hectare last May. We planted some Cabernet Franc and some more Precos.
Fantastic. And are you picking and fermenting the wine at White Castle? You have a winery there, or are you working with?
No, we use 3 Quires at Newent.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, it's about 12 miles from us, so quite handy.
They're in the UK, aren't they? They're in Gloucestershire, so they're just across the border.
Yes, yeah.
Very nice countryside, and a nice team there as well. They're a good outfit. So, well done on this. Do you remember much about the 2017 vintage and how it went for you?
Yes, yeah. So we had a little bit of frost. Got away quite lightly with the frost. For me, I think it was a good growing season for us. With a bit of frost, it naturally thinned a bit of fruit out as well. So it got a bit of intensity into the grapes.
Well, it's really lovely. It's ripe. I think, is it 11.5%, which is
yes,
a decent sugar level, and the tannins seem to be ripe. It's definitely identifiably Pinot Noir, and it's a challenge, I think, in our climate to ripen Pinot well enough for it really to show its flavour, because it can be a little thin and a little green. but I think this is really spot on. So well done.
Thank you very much.
Who else is tasting the White Castle Pinot?
Yeah.
Matt, what do you reckon?
I've some notes I've written. It is, as you said, Justin, unmistakably Pinot Noir. It's got some really nice sort of red fruit, but it's got that, there's a hint of that earthy, I think it's a bit like beetroot on the nose that comes through as well. And it's quite light. What else? And you've got a bit of oak in there as well. There's a bit of toastiness.
Yes.
Really nice. It's really, really nice. I'm
Rob, did you say what the blend was? Is it Pinot Noir plus Precoce?
No, it's Pinot Noir Precoce. All Pinot, 100% Pinot Noir Precoce.
Okay, right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the oak is really nicely judged because it's just present in the background, but it doesn't have any dominating factor. And with a relatively light style of red, you can find the oak sticks out a bit much. But for me, it's very nicely integrated. So I think it's a good wine. I've just noticed that we've been joined just towards the end of our call by Michael Dominguez, who I believe was joining us to say a few words. And Michael, I'd love to know a little bit about your business and what you're doing, and tell us a little bit about why you're joining the call.
No, absolutely. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Well, nice to virtually meet everyone. I'm sorry, but I must have had my timing wrong with this, and I'm sorry I missed the tasting because from the panel, it looked really amazing. So to give you a little bit of background, my name's Michael Dominguez, and I used to be the sparkling wine director at a sparkling wine house here in the United States called Cuvée Winery. And so my specialty is sparkling wine production. Now I do full-time consulting in the vineyard and in the winery, but a focus on the business side of it because I was in charge of purchasing, also managing the vineyards. And I've really been impressed by English sparkling wines, and have had the opportunity to taste through some. I'm also, I teach at our local community college wine education classes. I'm currently studying for my level 3 WSET. And I just think that there's tremendous growth and potential and really amazing quality in English wines in general. And just also wanted to share if anyone had any questions on any sparkling wine production, because that's what I've been doing for the last decade or so,
Michael,
from the vineyard in the glass.
Just, I believe you're from New Mexico, Albuquerque, is that right? And,
yes, that
so
is correct.
that kind of central south of America, it's next to between Texas and Arizona, is that right? So pretty
That
hot.
is correct.
Pretty
yes.
Pretty hot country there. How does the sparkling wine go down there?
So that's a great question. So thankfully, since it is high desert, we don't have to obviously deal with a lot of mildew or rot issues. We are actually at a pretty high elevation here in Albuquerque at 5,000 feet. And the Pinot Noir and the Chardonnay, which are the main varietals we use for sparkling wine at the Cuvée Winery, the winery I used to run, grow really well in this type of environment. And thankfully, with respect to picking even, and labor is extremely difficult for hand picking fruit, picking the earlier like we did there at 16 to 19 bricks, we were able to get more labor and not have all the chili farmers to take all of our labor. So it grows quite well. It's very sandy loam soils. There's a very good diurnal shift with respect to the temperature differential for day and night. And so yeah, it's tough growing grapes in the high desert, but there's a lot of wineries, especially now in Texas. There's a huge spike, and there's almost, I think, 400 wineries now in Texas. So I've actually been traveling there quite a bit as well.
Well, listen, are you joining the conference on Thursday? Because people who want to talk to you more maybe could take the chance to do that there.
Absolutely. Yes, I will be there.
Well, certainly I'd be interested to know a little bit more about New Mexico, but we don't have a lot of time now. So sorry, I'm glad you could join us at the end and we got to hear from you. But
No, thank you.
just want to finish up just on this Pinot Noir. Remind me who else had a glass of it. Matt, you've already spoken. Did anyone else have a glass of the Pinot? Just want to chip in a word. No, I think it's probably just me and Matt. Well, we're both thoroughly enjoying it. So I think probably the time has come, because we have reached 8 o'clock, which is supposedly the finish time. And last thing I want to do is keep you all longer than you want to. You might have supper to cook and to go on to. I hope you'll have a great day on Thursday. I'm probably not going to be able to be there for much of the day. I may be able to drop in the evening, where I think all the delegates can have the privilege of watching us all on Zoom, which I'm not sure how compelling that's going to be, while they also drink a glass of wine. And I hope it's a great success. And thank you all to the sponsors for making it happen. And it's, I think, important, as I said, that these events happen, that mean the English industry can get together and share what they know, because we will move forwards together and learn and make better and better wine. So at this stage, I just want to say thank you, and thanks for inviting me to come and talk about the wines. And I'm going to hand over back to anyone who set this call up to just do any closing remarks, and otherwise enjoy the rest of the evening, everyone, and see you all sometime soon.
Yeah, I think, Justin, probably hands over quite neatly to me, but thank you too. I think it just leaves me to say thank you from everybody on behalf and to Far Acre Vineyard, Plumpton College, Stanlake Park Wine Estate, White Castle Vineyard, Coolhurst Vineyard, and then Bourne Vineyards. Thank you very much for that fascinating stuff. Real shame that we couldn't hear Jane. She did leave some comments. I hope people read them. Oh, you're there now?
I'm now, yes, I got back in again at the end.
Oh, no shit. I dare I say it, Justin, do you want to have a quick question about Jane, about Oatley Vineyard, or do you think we have truly run out of time?
Well, I don't think, I'm happy to crack on for a couple more minutes. So let's it's a great shame we didn't hear from Jane before. So Jane, you did tell us a little bit about kernelling being the pink version of Kerner.
Yes, that's right. And it's slightly earlier, which makes it a bit easier to grow. As Stephen said, we planted it 30 years ago, not knowing much better. But we've kind of got to love it over the years. It's difficult to grow, but the climate's got a bit warmer. And we have no trouble selling wine. People like it.
Sure. Well, if you've got a following for Leonora's as a style that people ask for because they like the wine, then you definitely don't want to go changing what's in it. If you
No, it is actually fermented out fully dry. This one seems a little bit more rounded. The acid's a little bit lower. We also try and keep some. We're still selling a little bit of 2014 that we kept back because it matures in the bottle. It goes to honey like Riesling would. So we're quite attached to it, and we've carried on growing it. We're a very small vineyard. Like many, we left London, in our case, 30 years ago to plant vines. And we've been happily doing that ever since, working off the vineyard to make ends meet. But now I'm retired and we're doing it together, and it's great. And our son wants to take over. So it's been a kind of a real living the dream story for us.
Well, and what a pioneer, because 30 years ago, it wasn't nearly such a buzzing scene as it is now with so many different people. You were maybe, you're in Somerset, aren't you? Were there many other vineyards in Somerset at the time?
No, Colin Gillespie used to make our wines. There were 3 or 4, most of which are now not trading. But now there are more than there were then. And what you don't get now is well, I can buy it for £2.99 down Sainsbury's. Why should I buy yours? Kind of response it shows.
Oh, your corner of Somerset was Pilton and sorry, I've got Pilton Manor.
Pilton Manor, yes.
Yeah, was one of the major vineyards, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, and Wootton as well.
And Wootton, obviously, yeah. Both Gore Brown Trophy winners.
Yes. The soil is good, and there's quite a nice climate in the middle of Somerset because we're shielded by Exmoor from the worst of the southwest wind. So we have a good sandy loam, southeast slope, nice early sun.
Well, it's a lovely wine, Jane. I'd love to taste through some of your other wines at some point. I'm sure we will have the opportunity at some tasting somewhere down the line, but well done.
Thank you very much.
And yes, I think we probably should call this to a halt now, but it's great that we've managed to hear from Jane. And well, just thank you all very much for sticking along and keeping listening in. and I'm going off to have some.